Hello, welcome to Swarmcast here with Eliot, Clough, Sean, Bock, David Eickholt here on this Wednesday, previewing the game ahead. Of course, Iowa heading to Rutgers, the East Coast, and taking on the Scarlet Knights on Friday night this coming week. Is it on Big Ten Network?
Yes.
Is it on Big Ten Network? I thought it was on Fox.
Wow,
One of those two.
I think it would be on.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's on Fox because I did the preview and it's on Fox.
It's on Fox. Well, all right. Mulligan.
Okay, well, yep. Now we go. Taking on Rutgers on Fox on Friday evening. So Big Ten play starting off. The Rutgers offense has really kind of been rolling, even with the injuries. Granted, they have played some pretty not good teams through these first 3 weeks. So this will be their first test as well as Iowa's first matchup in the Big Ten. So what are we looking for in this one, guys? I know going into this season, I said I'm not a believer in Athan Kaliakmanis, and I'm sticking to it. So, but their offense has been producing. I think they're averaging 46.3 points per game at this point in time. But Dave, I'll start with you. What are you looking for from the Rutgers offense?
I mean, I'm very curious how Athan Kaliakmanis is going to respond in this spot, right? Because off air, we've talked about the struggles that Rutgers offensive line has had. They're on their third, if not fourth string right tackle at this point, and that's something that I'm curious if Phil Parker is really going to dial up the pressure. And we've talked a lot about this Iowa defensive line and the potential it has. Max Llewellyn had a pair of sacks last week. I think he's a guy that could cause a lot of issues for this front. Is this the game where Brian Allen breaks out a little bit? Aaron Graves. I mean, this should be a game where Iowa's defensive line and Iowa's linebacking core try to get as much pressure on Kaliakmanis as possible, because he's the type of guy where he doesn't really – I have not seen him fight back through a bunch of adversity throughout his career in terms of, like, if he starts off bad, he turns around the performance. But you got to give him credit. I know they haven't played great opponents right now. 7 touchdowns, no interceptions, completing over 70% of his throws. He's a guy who's made things happen during his final year of eligibility. But again, I think the Iowa defense is certainly a different level. But I think Rutgers has a bunch of different skill players that could, I don't want to say pose problems for Iowa, but they've been productive so far. I think right now they've kind of taken care of everything that they've had to taken care of. But the other side of it too is, if you remember in that first game, in their opener, they nearly ended up choking that game against Ohio. I think they were up 31-14 at one point. Rutgers ended up pulling it out 34-31. So this should be a game where if you're Iowa, you have to find a way to punch them in the mouth early, maybe create a turnover. I mean, they still haven't had a turnover, guys, since the start of the season. I think that's an issue. But this should be a game where, again, I think Iowa needs to really, really amp up the pressure on Kaliakmanis, send a couple of blitzes, trust your corners to be able to lock it down. TJ Hall's been great. I don't even want to say take away the run, Sean. For me, it's force them into third and longs, let your defensive line pin their ears back, and go get Kaliakmanis and force mistakes.
Yeah, they have a pretty good running back in Antoine Raymond, who was a guy that Iowa recruited a couple of cycles ago to kind of a big physical back out of Florida. But yeah, I mean, at the wide receiver position is really where Rutgers has thrived, or where they really have the clear-cut edge in this game. I think every other position on the field, Iowa has the advantage. I mean, yes, Athan Kaliakmanis is a much better stat line, has been more efficient than Mark Gronowski. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how Iowa can apply the pressure on Athan, because he's a much different quarterback when he has pressure on him. I know that's obviously a cliche. Like, not everyone's – like, there are very few quarterbacks that are good when the pocket is collapsing. And Athan does not fall into that category. He is not very efficient when the pocket is collapsing on him. And, I mean, with Iowa's defensive line, I think, on both sides of the ball, I think Iowa has a clear-cut advantage in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And when you think of a Ferentz-Schiano matchup, like, that's where it's going to be decided ultimately, in the trenches. And I think Iowa, even with some of the guys that they're down at the running back position, should be able to run the ball pretty effectively, even without Xavier Williams out there. We'll see how many snaps Kamari Moulton plays on Friday. it doesn't really feel like a situation where he's going to play like more than 20 snaps. Like, I'd be surprised if he plays like 15, 20. Like, maybe that's just me kind of thinking out loud, knowing kind of how the injury, guys coming back from injury goes with Kirk Ferentz. Unless it's at like a huge position of need, they're not going to play a ton of snaps, or they're going to kind of ease him into it a little bit. But then that also goes to show kind of the depth that Iowa has at the running back position too. So that's a positive in that side. But yeah, I mean, the wide receiver position is really where Rutgers stands out to me. You had Ian Strong, who didn't play in the last game for the Scarlet Knights. And I know Rutgers put up 60 points, but it took them some time to kind of get their offense going without Strong in there. KJ Duff is their big 6'6", 225-pound wide receiver, which is like freakish how big that dude is and just like how well he's able to run and some of the catches he's able to make. But yeah, it's going to be really fascinating to see how Iowa tries to go up against Duff, but also if Strong is kind of limited because he didn't play last game, as I mentioned. He didn't play last game, and, he's still kind of been a little iffy in practice, I think, throughout the week. He's expected to play, but just how much can he play? Because he's the guy that really unlocks the Rutgers offense, Rutgers passing attack. But then again, if Iowa gets pressure on Kaliakmanis, like it really, it'll make a difference, but it's, they got to get him the ball. And if you're getting pressure on him, Athan is a completely different quarterback.
For those watching on YouTube, yes, I have changed scenery again. One of these days, I'm going to learn that fiance's Wi-Fi is terrible in the guest room and better in the at the kitchen table. But yeah, I mean, everything you guys just said there, I'm in agreement on, especially in terms of the health. Like, I would feel much more questionable about this game and about Iowa's ability to win it if Rutgers was fully healthy, and they're not. Talking about the offensive line, like Max Llewellyn has 3 sacks through 3 games. This is a situation where he is on pace to be Iowa's first double-digit leader in sacks since Yosei Epinesa, which is telling.
AJ.
Sorry, AJ Epinesa. Yeah.
Looking ahead there, bud.
AJ Epinesa. Very different. AJ Epinesa, who is now in the NFL, plays for the Buffalo Bills. And I think that's telling of his capacity. And, granted, it's been against his 3 sacks have come against Albany and against who'd they just play? UMass. So this will be a test, I think, to see just how good he is. Dave, you mentioned some of the supporting cast on the defensive line. Jaden Harrell was sent on a couple blitzes this last week, so another opportunity to get some pressure on Kaliakmanis. I'm not really high on this guy. I did not think he was good at Minnesota. I think he's been good against bad teams for Rutgers. I've said similar things. Like when I was at UNI, I talked crap about Tommy Schuster, and then he carved up UNI. So, and then he went on to play for Michigan State. I don't know if he played, but he transferred to Michigan State. So we'll see. But I've never been a Kaliakmanis guy. The receiver core might be better at Rutgers, but again, you're looking at quarterback and Antoine Raymond's a pretty young running back, and they don't have a stable like Iowa does offensively, so to speak. Now, again, Iowa without Xavier Williams, Iowa potentially a limited Kamari Moulton. And you want to be careful, especially going into Indiana next week, especially if you don't have Xavier Williams for that one. Do we see more of TJ Washington? Do we see more of Nathan McNeil? Is he going to be in a spot to burn his red shirt here? Because he's getting in the game before Brevin Dahl, who is in his second year. And if that's the case, we might be talking about burning a red shirt. Is Jazzy Patterson going to get the start? Like, that running back position is really interesting for Iowa right now. Otherwise, to revert back to Rutgers, and let's stick with Rutgers here, the defense is not good. This is another opportunity for Iowa's offense to continue momentum. And I mentioned that, I think, earlier, either on a radio show or in the Monday Morning Quarterback. I've been hearing people say that they're nervous and not to take Rutgers lightly. And obviously you don't want to take any Big Ten competition lightly, but I don't think Rutgers is going to be that big of a challenge. I mean, you guys saw it in my preview. I picked Iowa to win 34-16. And a large part of it is because of the health of the offense and because the defense just isn't very good. Like, I'm just not in, however many years ago when 2 or 3 years ago when Iowa was really bad offensively, they put up 22 points on this Rutgers team. So this is just, I'm not really that concerned. I think Iowa is going to get rolling and take the momentum that they posted against UMass now into this one against the Rutgers defense.
Yeah, and I think too, looking at this Rutgers defense, they had a couple of guys that they brought in via the transfer portal that haven't really hit. They have a couple of corners who have graded out pretty well in Pro Football Focus, but there are a number of guys on the edge and at the linebacker position that they just haven't hit yet. And I think, that step up, and when you're going into the transfer portal and you bring guys from lower divisions, you're taking that risk of being like, okay, these guys were incredibly productive in the Sun Belt or the MAC. Like, okay, but, just because they're productive in those conferences doesn't mean that can really translate to the next level. And Rutgers has also been hit with the injury bug, where they have guys who should probably be backups, are third or fourth string guys on defense too, that, are starting in those defensive spots. So that's a really tough position for them. And that's where Iowa really needs to exploit this Rutgers team, because we talk about winning in the margins, winning in the trenches. You have to be able to do something with your offense in this game. Like, I'm not saying, you have to throw for 300 yards, whatever. But if you're Mark Gronowski, if you want to have this gap of a game, like if you want to win the way that you should in this game, you got to be able to make plays, and you got to be able to, convert on third and long, avoid third and long situations too, and just keep your offense on the field for a consistent number of time. It can't be like that Iowa State game where it's like in the first half, especially, where you're just going 3 and out to start. You got to be able to have extended drives, keep your defense off the field, keep them limited on the field, and just be able to be an efficient offensive group and really run the football too. And that's where one of the concerns I have is, I mentioned Rutgers wide receiver group. I'm really interested to see where, obviously Kamari Moulton's coming back, but to me, it feels like Xavier Williams and Kamari Moulton are probably two of your least volatile running backs in a way. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that. Like, Jazian Patterson's had some really good games, but there's sometimes where you're just like, dude, what are you doing? Like, where are you going? Like, why you run, like stuff like that. TJ Washington didn't have his best performance against Iowa State. And, if Rutgers is able to get pressure up front, which, Iowa's offensive line has the advantage there. He's got to be able to, take contact. Like, he can't just go down the first time he gets hit. He's got to be able to absorb that contact and run through. And then Nathan McNeil, I don't think he got any carries against Iowa State. This is your first, true road test as a college freshman. That's a pretty, big deal. So, yeah, you have Moulton coming back, but I think, they're going to miss Xavier Williams a bit, because I think he's probably that number 2, least volatile guy right behind Kamari Moulton in that regard.
When it comes to Nathan McNeil, I think he needs some touches, and it is interesting just because the depth in the running back room. But I'd also point to this. It's up to TJ Washington to kind of earn his role right now when it comes to being productive on Saturdays. Like, he had a handful of good runs in the opener against Albany. But Sean's right. How many times has he gone down in first contact where he misses an open hole? Like, at some point, you have to find production. And, Eliot and I kind of talked about this yesterday after Kirk got done with the press conference. What drives Iowa fans crazy when it comes to young, talented players? The fact that Kirk kind of said the quiet part out loud. He said he's young. He might be young, but he just runs differently. And we've seen flashes of that. And I think he's kind of earned his right to be able to be a little bit more of the offense at this point. In regarding to him potentially redshirting, maybe I'm overreading into this, but my belief is they're not going to redshirt him, because if you go back to his comment before the Albany game, he was asked about the freshman. He said, "There's only one freshman right now." I'm paraphrasing here, but he said the only freshman with the green light is Nathan McNeil. Wasn't talking about Yosei Epinesa. Wasn't talking about a couple other positions. It was Nathan McNeil. That tells me they're not afraid to go over the 4 games, and in fact, they might have to, because look at the way the running back position health-wise has kind of gone so far. Like, they may need him, and they got to be able to keep him fresh. But I also think he's kind of earned that role. I'd like to see Iowa continue their success with the scripted plays. That's one thing I don't think we kind of gave Iowa enough credit for against UMass. Again, it's UMass. We understand that. but they had 20 points in the first quarter. The scripted plays that we've been criticizing them about not being productive on the scripted plays, they were finally productive against UMass. 3 plays, score, touchdown. I want to see Iowa continue that downfield passing attack. They put more on film. I think we're going to see a little bit more of the slow mesh as well. One of the more interesting comments that I heard yesterday, I was asking Bo Stevens about the slow mesh, and he said, it's the one formation, one thing we do that goes against everything they teach offensive linemen. He said they're comfortable with it, but it just kind of puts the offensive line in an interesting situation where are they going in pass pro or are they going in run blocking? It just changes their entire mentality and their execution behind it. But I think that'd be an excellent way to throw a bad Rutgers defense even more off its game. But I'd like to see Iowa air it out more. I'd like to see Iowa challenge the wide receivers to live up to the wide receiver name instead of what Kirk said. You know, he jokes them the wide droppers, which I was a little bit surprised he said that, but I found it pretty funny. I want to see KJ Parker get more run, even with the drops. And at some point, guys, I think Sam Phillips needs to get the football more. But as far as attacking the Rutgers defense and everything, I think you put it in Mark Gronowski's hands. You let him continue that momentum he's building. And again, it's not where it needs to be. And I know the quality of opponent, but the one positive through 3 weeks is Iowa's passing game has gotten better week by week by week. And they need to continue the upward trajectory because assuming they get out of this Friday game, there's a potential season-defining game next weekend at Kinnick Stadium against what could be an undefeated Indiana team. We'll see what happens when they play Illinois this weekend.
I'll take what you both just said and kind of put it together in that, one, I don't think they run the slow mesh this weekend. I think they saved that for Indiana. They didn't run it at all against UMass, which was smart. 2, I think you just RPO the living hell out of this Rutgers defense. Like, you just keep them guessing on every play. And because, I mean, RPOs, what it does is it just puts the defenses in disadvantaged situations where you make the play off of what the D end is doing or the Sam backer. It depends on what defense or base defense the opposing team runs, or the safety. Now, with the RPO, what it does is it gives you 3 options: quarterback run, running back run, or pass the ball. And in my opinion, that's what's going to keep this offense balanced. Whereas you're just running an outside zone, you're running a drop back pass with Gronowski, and he's not the most natural thrower of the football. But when you're putting the defense in disadvantaged situations where you can take advantage of them, then you just you're not necessarily relying on your own talent, whereas you're taking advantage of what's given to you. And I think that's kind of what you got to do against a bad defense. And against good defenses too. It's variable, but I think right now I'm not super necessarily thinking you got to air it out. I'm not thinking you got to give the ball a bunch of times to Jazz Patterson or Nathan McNeil. I do think, you mentioned the volatility, Sean. Jazz hasn't been all that volatile through 3 games this season relative to what he was before, right? He's probably been one of the more consistent guys. And that's, also based off the fact that he's surrounded by a bunch of other young guys right now. And he's the oldest guy in the room. And you also know what you're going to get from him, which is hit the hole, hit it hard. That's Jazz Patterson right there. I don't know. It depends on how healthy Kamari is, but in my opinion, if Kamari is not healthy, Jazz should get the start. Kamari isn't fully healthy. I think Jazz should get the start just based on the fact that he's been the most effective back. So we'll see how that shakes out there. But man, I think this is another game. Again, in my preview, I think Mark throws for 2 touchdown passes, runs for another, and say Jazz scores I'll probably say Jazz scores. Either that or Kamari gets a big run. But this is a situation where I don't think you necessarily need to force throwing the football downfield like you did against UMass, because you could do that with relative ease because of how bad of a football team UMass was. You still have to set some things up. Rutgers has way more talent than UMass does. Like you still have to execute a game plan against a Big Ten opponent. So in my opinion, I think this is going to be a relatively balanced game like Iowa wants it to be, particularly with the RPOs. Again, Dave, do you think they run slow mesh, or do you just like want to see more of it? Because I want to see more of it too. I just don't think that they
I think situational. I think situational they will. I don't think it'll be in the scripted plays. It will not be in the scripted plays. It's situational. I think they will. I'd like to see more of it than I think they would. Then I think they would run. And I understand saving it. I understand practicing it. Part of the reason I want to see it more is so they can apply it moving forward and they have more game reps to base it off of rather than go straight from practice into a game situation, just because of how difficult I believe that offense is to run for literally everybody involved. Like it might be just as hard to run that style of offense as it is to cover that style of offense because so many different variables have to go right. Everything needs to be on the same page. Iowa's lived its kind of offense philosophy as 11 guys need to all be on the same page for one common goal. Heard a lot of that from Brian. The slow mesh is like the equivalent of everybody has to be on the same page. Otherwise, that's something that I feel like is a high risk, high reward type thing. So again, it's more so I'd like to see it rather than Iowa's game planning for it to use it. I mean, Sean, you want to jump back in here?
Okay. And more of
that was between you guys, so I was kind of just sitting here. Just
do you guys agree with me that I think that Jazz should start if Kamari's not fully healthy, which we assume he's not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think that starting a guy really matters. I think in this case, there's a gap.
I don't necessarily either, but.
Yeah, I think there's a gap though, like with this room right now between like the guys that are healthy with Jazz and with TJ. Like I think there's a gap there in terms of consistency and just like in terms of production, like you said this season. Like I know I kind of gave Jazz a hard time because he's volatile, but he has been the most consistent back right now in the room that's been healthy.
Yeah. In regards to Nathan McNeil. I'm in the same boat as you, Dave. It's like I think one thing that we're not necessarily talking about is his vision and his reaction time. Like the offensive line was not particularly great. Like the second group of guys that were, or second or third group of guys that were out there in the blocking, and Nathan's ability to recognize what's going on, adjust to it, and make a play, I think is really unique. Now he has to do that against Big Ten competition.
That's kind of where I'm at. And that's why I mean he runs mature. Like he just strikes me as a guy that understands his skill set, understands the style of offense that's being ran, and like he strikes me as a guy who spends a lot of time in the film room, quite frankly, because again, it hasn't translated Big Ten competition. He has not had a shot at doing it. But his recognition in the middle of a play, like you said, to make something happen and to be that consistent, it's one of those traits where obviously you can teach it, but like that's a third or fourth year caliber running back, not a true freshman who enrolled early. So I think this is a guy who's utilized every single spring rep. He got every single rep since he's been on campus. And, you know, I think Iowa right now, what do you need to see more of the offense in every regard? It's consistency. And again, based on level of competition, I get that. But Nathan McNeil, every time he touches the ball, it just seems like something positive is going to happen based off that. And he just runs with, I don't want to say different gear, but he just runs different than I think every Iowa's running back has shown on the roster. But again, I can't really base it off Kamari Moulton this season, specifically because we have not been able to see Kamari. And I'm kind of with you guys. I think they'll limit Kamari, but at the same time, like if he's been practicing the last 2 days, you know, Kamari strikes me as a guy who goes in there with a big chip on his shoulder and wants 20 carries. Do I think he gets that? No. I'm going to say he gets around 12 to 13 carries in total. And if he's hot, you keep feeding him. If his body continues to hold it, you keep feeding him. But this, again, that strikes me as where if Iowa was able to run for 5 yards a carry, I'm looking at Iowa to do some play action and look for some of the deep post routes that they had success with against UMass.
Yeah, I mean, no, I thought you guys were still going back and forth. Sorry, I kind of zoned out there. I feel like we talked about. I feel like I've already said so much about the running game. Like we could talk about something else now. Like I didn't have anything else to add.
Well, I mean, to be fair though, too, I mean, it's all in deal with RPO, and I mean, I don't think the starter really matters. I think it's just more so like they're going to feed the hot hand, whoever it is. But the biggest question to me is Nathan McNeil going to get meaningful carries in this game? And I don't think they're game planning for it. I think they should.
And how healthy is Kamari? Because we just don't know. Like we're gonna.
I was surprised he came back this week. I thought he was going to come back next week. I was a little bit surprised when Kirk kind of said, "Oh yeah, I think he's going to play." I was like, "Okay." I didn't think he was going to.
I'd probably put the carries
number, but
yeah, I'd probably put the carries number at 8 to 10, just because of how well Jazz has been playing. So, one point that you made there, Dave, about McNeil and what he's done, looking like more of a third or fourth year back. In the little bit that we've been able to see from him, I think that's what Iowa has been wanting and what fans have been wanting from TJ Washington, and we haven't seen it to date. I think that's why folks are so frustrated. And Sean mentioned the fact that he's been going down on first contact. We shared some intel on that following week 2, and folks can go check that out at HawkeyeInsider.com. But that is probably why I'm more pushing for McNeil to get more touches. I think TJ's been frustrating. TJ Washington's been a little frustrating to start, especially getting those starts and then playing like that. Like if he was in a secondary or tertiary role and playing like that, I think people would be less frustrated with him. But now I just think he has forced your hand, in addition to Xavier being hurt, in addition to Kamari being hurt, to start Jazz. And and also given Jazz has been around for the longest. So that's probably why I feel the way I do. Again, I think we're all on the same page that starting doesn't necessarily matter. Jazz has been really good in that complementary role. I don't really have much to say else about the running backs. We've been talking about them for like 10 minutes now, but do you guys have anything else to add, Dave? I saw you unmuted your mic.
Not about the running backs. I think we need to flip over the passing game a little bit more, because I think we need to talk about the wide receivers a little bit. Then we need to dive into Iowa's defense a little bit more. But we all agree when it comes to defense. I mean, Iowa's defensive line can dictate this game. If they get after Kaliakmanis early, get him frustrated, get him riled a bit, and Iowa punches him in the mouth early, I think those are two big keys. But for me, guys, I'd like to see, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think KJ needs a little bit more reps. And I know he's had some drop issues this year, but to be fair, who really hasn't right now for Iowa? Like, it just seems like even Seth Anderson, he had 2 first quarter scores, had a couple drops as well. But KJ, just what we've heard behind the scenes and how coaches and teammates talk about him, like this is a guy who's clearly been a playmaker in practice. And now that he's kind of got that first catch, that first touchdown out of the way, can that transition over into being a productive role? I'd like to see Dayton Howard get a little bit more run. I think it was telling that we didn't see Dayton Howard get a bunch of run against UMass. But the other thing is, I think Iowa needs to have more route concepts where Sam Phillips is the number one guy, because he just strikes me as a guy who's getting the most consistent separation. He's capable of big plays. I think he's got a little bit of quickness to him, in addition to probably Iowa's best straight line speed. I don't necessarily love him in that X role, especially on run blocking plays. I think there's a little bit of nerves in regards to Mark about throwing the ball downfield to him unless he's wide open due to his, Sam Phillips' size. But when you talk about route running, and that's been a big issue for Iowa, I think, through the early going, I'm a believer that Sam Phillips needs to be a much bigger part of this offense than he is at this point. But ultimately, guys, I want your take on who are a couple of wide receivers that you feel like need to step up to the plate specifically. I know we could say the entire room, but like who are the 2 guys that you kind of identify as being the guy that can take that next step or needs to take the next step in order to take over that role, assuming Reese Vanderzee, when he comes back, is going to be a prominent part of the passing offense?
I mean, I feel like Phillips is the one that seems to be like consistently open, or one that's consistently missed when he's open. And that's one of the things I think Mark really needs to improve on too, is being able to make multiple reads when he's in the pocket, because yes, you don't have a lot of time, but I think he's one of the leaders in the Big Ten in average time to throw on Pro Football Focus amongst starting quarterbacks. So he's getting more time than a lot of everyone else, but he needs to obviously let things develop, but he also needs to make decisions quickly. I think that too, like with the confidence thing, is really important for him. But yeah, I mean, with the main three of Seth Anderson, Sam Phillips, and then Jacob Gill right now, like all three of those guys need to be reliable because we've seen games where I think each Anderson and Gill both have had 2 drops in one game each, right? Hasn't Gill had 2 drops? Didn't he have – which game did he have 2 against? Was it Albany?
Iowa State.
Iowa State, okay. And then Anderson had the 2 drops last week. So that's something that, we talked about with wide receivers and what Kirk Ferentz said. Like, that's something that really needs to improve. And Iowa doesn't have the offense, or it doesn't have the potent passing game or consistent passing game to have guys be dropping, balls in some of these big plays, especially these third down situations, because, man, that can really turn the tide of some of these drives and really, turn the tide of just the game in general too. So really just all three of those guys I feel like need to be more consistent, more reliable. And especially in Big Ten play, you can't really have one that's lacking because, yes, we know that the depth is improved, but that's still an area where you have to really master that. You have to be able to make some of those physical catches because that's part of being a wide receiver. Like you have to be able to make catches in contact and, have those tight windows too.
And Sean, I think 3 of those 5 or 6 drops that they had against UMass were not physical situations.
No.
They were open.
Yeah. It is the same with Zach Ortworth and DJ Vanami too.
Exactly. The 2 that stick out to me are Seth Anderson when the tip of the ball was literally in his hands and then it I don't know how it popped out. The other one is KJ Parker making the grab and bringing it down, and then it falls out of his hands. Those are both on third down. Iowa should have probably scored 60-plus points against UMass. You can't have drive enders be balls like that, especially. I think Kirk said something about the angle of the ball or how the ball was passed to him. It's no. He's just trying to take some blame off the receivers, I think, and take some heat off the receivers because you are getting a full ride scholarship to the University of Iowa and getting paid on top of that. Catch the freaking football. I'm sorry. We usually are pretty measured here on Swarmcast, and I still think I'm being measured. Catch the freaking football.
You are.
You
are. I mean, if they clean up half the drops, Eliot, Gronowski's at about mid-60s in completion percentage. And then the narrative about some of his throws are probably changed. Now, look, he's missed a couple throws. The ball placement at times has not been great. But if you look at what Iowa's doing and what they've ran, I'm not going to sit here and criticize Gronowski when he's had near double-digit drops since the start of the season. If they clean up half that and he's throwing the ball 64% completion, and ultimately if you're not going to look to push the ball downfield, you're not going to – I can't hold that against him. But you're right. It literally boils down to – and I said it in my column after the Iowa State game. Quite simply, it can't be that hard. They have to catch the football. And I thought, again, it was a joke, but I thought Kirk Ferentz summed it up best yesterday. They're called wide receivers, not wide droppers. It is that simple to me. They got to take the opportunities when they're given to them.
This is where losing a Reese Vanderzee and losing an Addison Ostrenga hurt the most because now you're in a situation where KJ Parker, we've heard routinely about his phenomenal ball skills. He had that catch over his shoulder that he thought was a touchdown. I thought he was very clearly out of bounds. I didn't think it was a great throw by Hank Brown. And then 2 drops, Seth Anderson, 2 drops, DJ Vanami, a drop last week, Zach Ortworth, a drop, Jacob Gill, 2 drops. Jacob Gill earned this reputation of being this safety valve go-to guy, and maybe he has to have Reese Vanderzee around in order to be Reese Vanderzee has to be in those roles to make those tough catches, and then Jacob Gill can be, I don't know. But your lead receivers can't be those guys. You know who hasn't been that guy to drop the ball? Sam Phillips, to your point, Dave. Sam Phillips needs to be a fixture in this offense right now. He's one of those guys, his speed is game-breaking speed. His ability to catch the ball and make a play with it he's one of those classic guys. You get him the ball and good things happen. He has to be a fixture in this offense right now, not in a couple weeks, not later on in the season. Right now, him getting as many touches as he did against UMass was huge. I mean, watching that myself after the game was over, I'm like, good. Sam Phillips getting the ball. Good. Sam Phillips getting the ball. Good. Sam Phillips getting the ball. Up. Seth Anderson drop. He just has to be. He has to be on the field more. The issue is blocking. Like against Iowa State, he missed some incredibly key blocks in the run game. And that's where you're missing Reese Vanderzee and Addison Ostrenga too.
So I think that wraps up kind of the receiver conversation. Something that I want Sean's take on first, and something that I'm very curious about myself. We talked a few weeks about what level of concern we have right now with Mark Gronowski, and Eliot and I discussed on it. Sean, how concerned are you with special teams right now? Because we did not preview it much going into the season, because you look at the personnel, you look at LeVar Woods. Quite frankly, he's earned the benefit of the doubt, but you think about the missed extra point, multiple bad snaps, the punt block, Albany being able to block a punt, the return game against Iowa State. And I think that was Caden Weechen's worst game as a Hawkeye. I don't think he's going to replicate that at any point this season. But those are the type of mistakes that will cost Iowa in Big Ten play. So, Sean, how concerned are you right now with the special teams?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with what special teams expert Tyler Kluver said on Twitter earlier this week, where he was mentioning that the punt block is fixable. That's something that, like, Montgomery just didn't stay long enough to, like, get his chip, or, like, chip the guy who was coming in to block the punt. So that's just kind of, like, staying disciplined and, making the play and, finishing the play too. So that's something that they can work on, or at least, think in his head that can't happen again. It seems like the snapping is the issue. And I think that's one of the things on the field goals. Because it feels like that's one of the big things that I think a lot of people kind of glossed over going into the season was you're replacing one of the best long snappers in Iowa program history in Luke Elkin. There's a reason why he is in the NFL now. And that is just kind of something that they've really seemed to struggle with. There has been an issue with some of those field goals that Drew Stevens has missed this year. Just the snapping and, like, being able to get that timing down. But then, and it's the holder too. You got to be able to get that down and be able to put it in the right spot for Stevens to hit it and hit it consistently. So I'm not worried about punt coverage. I wasn't not too worried about Weechin. It's just a matter of, like, okay, Iowa State is a really good special teams unit. You got to give him props there. Weechin was just trying to do too much, and I think, that he was trying to maybe make up for the penalty that he had at the start of the game. So I think he was already probably in his head a bit, so he's got to stay stronger in that regard. But I think the one issue that I have with special teams is the snapping, like the long snapping. I think that's something that they really need to improve, because that's, if you're Iowa, you win games by, you win close games. You don't blow teams out. You have to take every point that you can. So that's got to be an issue. That's something they really got to fix.
Is Speltz the snapper on kicks and Worrell the snapper on punts?
I think Worrell is kicks.
I think that's right.
Remember, let me look.
I think that's right too. I was gonna say, let's go back to the depth chart for that. But I do believe. I mean, the other part was maybe we should pay closer attention. Do you guys remember during we got a chance to talk to LeVar during Media Day, or maybe in the summer where they were talking about long snapper? Maybe even Kirk said it preseason. They didn't seem sold on who was going to be the starting long snapper, and they said it was kind of still an ongoing competition going back and forth. I think looking back, we probably should have paid a little bit more attention to that than we did. But of course, obviously, with all the wide receiver stuff with Mark and everything, other things took precedent. But kind of revisiting that now and rethinking about it, that's something we probably should have had at least a little bit higher up on our preseason notes.
Worrell is kick or field goals, and then Speltz is punts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is of note. You mentioned, Sean, in my rewatch, I noted Jaden Montgomery missing that chip or not being as fully locked in on that chip as he should be. But on the PAT and the kick, that was a snap thing. I didn't really pay attention to that. Are you like pretty positive that was the issue.
I
It
think
wasn't like
I
a
think
Drew
it's
Stevens issue.
I think it's a big snap and hold thing.
Okay.
That's my
Yeah,
assumption.
we're gonna have to.
Tyler Kluver has said that too. Tyler Kluver has said it.
Kluver's where I got it.
Kluver's
where I got it from, and then I just rewatched, and I was like, okay, I could see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pay close. I mean, we're all going to be watching it this weekend, but I'll pay closer attention to it for Monday Morning Quarterback as well. So that's something of note that needs to get fixed ASAP as possible, as Michael Scott would say. Regarding the defense, force a turnover or two, man. They got to get a pick or two or a fumble recovery in this game. That's the one thing I'm paying most attention to. And if they're going to get the pressure, like we've talked about, the defensive front getting pressure on Kaliakmanis, now is the time for Cohen Entringer to get a pick, Xavier Wampa to get a pick, TJ Hall. Maybe you get a tip ball off the line of scrimmage and Carson Shire brings one down. It's got to happen. Got to happen this week.
I can't add on anything other than that. You're exactly right. I mean, I love, like I said, I love Seth Wallace's nickname for the DBs right now. It's the No Boys instead of the Doughboys because they can't get a turnover right now.
So good.
All-timer quote from Wallace, and it's completely on brand. But you know what? I do think that inspires an interception. I think TJ Hall's due for one. But the more concerning thing for me when it comes to the turnovers and specifically interception, guys, like, how many passes has Iowa's DBs or linebackers, how many of them have they had in their hands or even remotely had a shot at intercepting? There have not been many that I don't want to say they've dropped, but like they haven't even been in a crazy position to like pick off any passes. So that's more concerning to me. And again, I know defenses measure turnovers in a different way. Like they say, oh, a 3-and-out's a turnover. It's probably like a half a turnover because you still give up a punt. You're not taking advantage of the short field. You know, you rush a quarterback, you get him off his routine. Like there are different ways to measure how good a defense is. Like it's not that simple, right? But at some point, guys, like something's got to give for this defense, especially for how consistent they've been over the years. But again, that's kind of my rewatching, kind of really digesting the first 3 games. I just don't think they've had a lot of passes that they've even been remotely had a shot at intercepting. So that might be the more concerning trend to me more than anything else.
I think there were some of those deep balls that they had against Iowa State that they might have been able to get. I thought obviously that angle that TJ Hall had where I think he batted down with his left hand. If you try and intercept that, that's a big risk you're taking. So I think to be able to just kind of go up with his one hand to bring that down, that's, probably the safe way to do it. But yeah, and this goes back to obviously, trying to get pressure on Kaliakmanis this weekend, get him, force the pocket to collapse, make him really uncomfortable. And that's potentially going to lead to something, in terms, because he's a much different quarterback when the pocket is, when he's under duress. And that's an area where I think Iowa, and it starts with the defensive line and getting that pressure up front. But obviously the defensive backs to finish the job too. And I think having 2 guys, I think Eliot mentioned it before, or someone mentioned it before, just having like 2 cash guys on the field, like that should be, prime real estate. That was you, Eliot. That's prime real estate to get something to happen, like in terms of just an interception or some sort of turnover. And I think this is a week where they do it.
You mentioned TJ Hall, Dave, so I've got 2 points here. This starting to, ramp up and get some turnovers throughout the season, 3, 4, 5 picks from TJ Hall. If that happens, he solidifies himself into that category of those guys who had that stuff. Like, I think he's already done it. I think he's going to be one of the elite corners in the Big Ten and one of those guys that has been a Phil Parker success story, especially later on in his career. But if he nabs a few picks, not only is his draft stock going up, but his spot in probably Iowa football history as one of those DBs, as one of those Phil Parker stories gets solidified there too. And I think that is also another reason for his draft stock to go up. So that's my first point. Second point, Jaden Harrell on these blitzes. That's an opportunity for him to punch the ball out. He did punch a ball out against Iowa State that was recovered by Iowa State near their goal line. Had Iowa recovered that, we're talking about that game a little differently. This is another opportunity for a guy like Jaden Harrell, which I don't want to speak for you guys. Dave and I, you and I had this conversation, is that he has not been all that impressive so far. This is an opportunity, if he punches a ball out, if he forces a fumble, if he recovers a fumble, to start building some more of that equity and that ability to stay on the field as the season progresses, even though, say, a Cam Buffington or a Jaden Montgomery might be nipping at his heels a little bit. So there are multiple layers to this. To me, TJ Hall grabs a pick. You start talking about him a little bit differently. Jaden Harrell forces a fumble, recovers a fumble. He starts building up some of that stock, some of that ability to stay on the field, even though, you know, he's not playing maybe at a Jay Higgins level, at a Jack Campbell level. You start seeing some of those things. It's like, okay, now it's getting to or if he tips a ball, right? Tips a ball, it lands in Cohen Entringer's arms, Zach Lutmer's arms. Then you're starting to talk about, okay, he's starting to earn some of this respect. He's starting to earn some of this equity to be able to stay on the field and not be overtaken by a Jaden Montgomery or a Cam Buffington.
This is a very critical game, I think, for Jaden Harrell, just in terms of really establishing himself as the guy at Mike. And I think the other thing is, and Eliot, you and I talked about off air, he's not getting enough tackles for the way this defense is designed. I mean, they're designed to funnel tackles to linebackers, and especially the guys in the trenches, to open up opportunities. Wyatt Black was the pure definition of that. That's why he, I think, was an underrated part of last couple of years' defense. But I think Jaden Harrell needs to prove. I thought he was a good blitzer last couple of weeks. I like the addition of that. It's definitely a new wrinkle. I mean, that's what they primarily used Nick Jackson. Nick Jackson was a really good blitzer. Wouldn't get a lot of sacks, but he'd be disruptive and he would attack the openings that they'd get. So a lot of things I think to watch. I know we kind of gave our final predictions in our written piece that Sean put together, but you guys have any final comments? I think we all have Iowa winning this week, correct?
Yes, I got one more thing on Jaden Harrell. I don't know if you guys noticed this in this 4-2-5. I think it's on only third downs, but in the 4-2-5 on third down packages, you know who's playing the mic? You know who's playing the will? Carson Shire's playing the mic. Jackson Rexroth's playing the will.
That's a good thing to know, too.
That makes me start to think, how long is Jaden Harrell going to be on the field through this season?
Mm-hmm.
So to that point I just made, that's something to note. Secondarily, to go back to your point, Dave, predictions, I got Iowa 34-16. Again, interception, turnover, what have you. Stop the freaking drops, man. And then 3, I got my eye on Jaden Harrell.
Yeah, I had Iowa 24-14, I think. I think I did 24-17 for our Rutgers site, but I meant to do 24-14. Comes down to winning in the trenches, obviously, and being able to make those extra plays on the offensive end, because I think Iowa, like I said previously, I think Iowa has the advantage in probably at every position except wide receiver, and they need to exploit that.
Yeah, I had 24-17. I think it's closer than Iowa fans would like, but this is a game where Iowa needs to win. Like they have to win this game. I hate saying that, fourth game of the season, but like with the way the schedule unloads late, way everything else works out, this is a game where Iowa 100% has to come away with a win. And I think Mark Gronowski in the passing game need to take a big step forward. And this needs to be a game where the Iowa defensive line just feast. And like you said, Eliot, I think Jaden Harrell needs to prove himself and really establish himself as the guy at Mike, or at least a versatile kind of backer.
For any loss that isn't to Indiana, Oregon, or Penn State the rest of the way, we're talking about people checking out and moving on to men's basketball and women's basketball. That's just the way it is. And I mean, three losses to those teams. We're talking about a 4-loss season. You know, it's 8-4, 8-5 at the end of it all. And, you know, it's another classic Kirk Ferentz season, but, you know, you win 8 games. So we'll see how it shakes out. But
that's assuming you beat every single rival, too.
Football.
I mean,
exactly.
And that's not given. That's why this Friday's game is so critical to me. Because, yes, Iowa has the marquee matchups at home outside the one at USC. But then you're playing all the rivals. And, I don't think Wisconsin's good. I don't think Minnesota's good. Nebraska is definitely better than they've been. these are not guaranteed wins, guys. And I think that's something that, you know, I sound crazy and I'm not trying to throw pessimism in the air, but I'm going to keep it real. If Iowa loses this game on Friday, there is a very real chance they're fighting for bowl eligibility.
We shall see. Ending on a very fun note from David Eickholt here on Swarmcast on this Wednesday. We got all of our preview content. We got way more coming. I got an article coming on drops, focal points, all those things, of course. And we'll have our live coverage of the game on Friday there at Hawkeye Insider, and of course on each of our Twitter pages. David Eickholt, Sean Bock, Eliot Clough here for Hawkeye Insider. And you know, one thing I'll say is that I from time to time here in this first part of the season, I still have these moments where I'm like, Dave, Sean, and I are all on the same team, and I'm giddy about it. So,
oh yeah, brother.
Hell yeah!
Years in the making.
Yep. We're only getting started. So join us over at Hawkeye Insider. Plenty of awesome content for us, and of course, you can subscribe there. Subscribe here on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave that rate and review. Drop a like, drop a comment there on YouTube for us. We will see you next time.